I trusted my neighbor to watch my daughter while I worked nights. She came home crying, saying he locked her outside for hours. She was loud. "I don't do kids," he said, laughing. I quit my job the next day and spent every hour building the case that would strip him of everything. I live in a small apartment complex in Milwaukee. Not the worst part of town, but definitely not the best either. It's mostly older people, single folks, quiet families. I work nights at a manufacturing plant about 30 minutes out. It's not great money, but it keeps the lights on. I have one daughter, Zoe. She's 7, full of energy, always asking questions, always humming or drawing or bouncing around. She's my whole world. Her dad took off before she turned 2. No support. No calls. I don't even bother talking about him anymore. Normally, I had a sitter, Marcy, a woman in her late 50s from 2 blocks over. Sweet lady. She had grandkids of her own and treated Zoe like one of them. But about 3 weeks ago, Marcy called me and said her mom had fallen. She had to leave town indefinitely. I had no backup plan. That same day, I ran into Greg in the hallway. Greg lives directly across from us. I didn't know much about him. Just that he worked from home, didn't say much, and had a dog. He walked twice a day like clockwork. We'd nod at each other in the halls, sometimes chat for a minute about the weather or trash pickup delays. That was it. So when I mentioned my sitter situation, just venting out loud, he surprised me. "I work from home," he said. "I could keep an eye on her if it's just overnight. I don't sleep much anyway." I hesitated, but I was desperate. "You sure?" "Yeah. I mean, I don't have kids, but I can handle it. I had nieces and nephews growing up. It's just overnight, right?" I asked Zoe how she felt. She said she liked Mr. Gregg. He had let her pet his dog once. That was enough for me. The first 2 nights went okay. I'd leave around 9:30 p.m., drop Zoe off at his door with her backpack, pajamas, and snacks. Pick her up just after 6 a.m. She said they watched cartoons. He gave her cereal and let her sleep on his couch. Third night, everything changed. I got home at 6:05 a.m. I didn't even make it to the door before I saw her. Zoe was sitting on the floor outside our apartment, curled up like a little ball. Her jacket was zipped up, but she was shivering. Her eyes looked swollen, and she had that look like she'd been crying for hours but didn't want to cry anymore. I dropped my bag and ran over. "Zoe? What happened?" She didn't answer right away, just hugged me hard and buried her face in my coat. I unlocked the door and brought her inside. I made her hot chocolate, sat her down, and waited. She looked so small sitting there at the table, not saying a word. Then finally, he made me sit outside. He said I was loud. He said he didn't want to hear kids anymore. Then he locked the door. I knocked, but he didn't open. What time was that? I don't know. It was still dark. I walked across the hall. I didn't care how early it was. I banged so hard, I probably woke half the floor. Greg opened the door after a minute. He looked tired, robe on, hair a mess. He looked at me like I was the inconvenience. "You locked my daughter outside?" He raised an eyebrow, then smirked. "She was loud. I don't do kids. Thought you'd be back soon. She was fine." I didn't say anything else, just stared at him while my hands shook. Then I turned around, went back in, and shut the door. I quit my job later that morning. Told my supervisor I had to take care of something important. He tried to get me to stay. I didn't even explain. I had $820 in the bank. Enough for maybe 2 weeks if I rationed. I didn't care. I pulled Zoe out of school for a couple days. We stayed home together. I let her sleep in my bed. I kept the lights low. I cooked pancakes and played music to fill the silence. While she slept, I started digging. I didn't know what I'd find. But I wasn't going to let a man like that get away with making my daughter feel unwanted. I didn't even know where to start at first. I Googled everything. How to report neighbor for child endangerment, legal action for neglect. Can you press charges for locking a child out? Most sites gave vague answers. Depends on the state, needs evidence, call CPS. I didn't want to call CPS, not yet. I didn't want them asking me why I left my daughter with a man I barely knew. I was afraid they'd turn it on me. I needed more. I needed proof. So I started watching him. For 2 nights, I sat by the peephole while Zoe slept. Greg left his apartment at almost the same time each night, around midnight. Hoodie jeans, sometimes with his dog, sometimes without. Always alone. I got curious. On the third night, I followed him. He walked 5 blocks to a strip mall and went into a little dive bar called The Hinge. He stayed there until 2 a.m., then came home. So much for working from home and not sleeping much. I went back the next night. I waited until he left, then knocked on the door of the woman who lived below him. Miss Carla. She's in her 70s, sharp as a tack. Did you hear anything strange the other night? I asked. My daughter said he made her sit in the hallway for hours. Carla didn't even hesitate. Damn right I heard it. Poor girl was crying outside for a long time. I almost came up but figured maybe you were close behind. That man? He slammed his door around 10:30 and didn't come back out till morning. That was it. I had a witness. I wrote everything down. Exact times, what Zoe told me, what Carla said, Greg's late-night bar trips. I saved it all in a folder. Then I remembered something Zoe had said the first day she stayed with him. He has cameras. I didn't think much of it back then. But if he had indoor cameras, and if he was stupid enough to keep them on, maybe there was footage. So I went bold. The next day, I knocked on Greg's door. He didn't answer. I waited a few minutes, then went to the building manager, Rob. I told him what happened. He seemed shocked. Promised he'd look into it. 2 hours later, Greg knocked on my door. He wasn't smiling now. You trying to ruin my life over a brat who got her feelings hurt? I stood in the doorway, blocking him from seeing Zoe behind me. You made her sit outside for hours. He shook his head, scoffing. It wasn't hours. And she was being a pain. Drawing on my floor. I told her to take a break. She's 7. She's your responsibility. That part hit hard. But then he said something that made my blood run cold. Careful. People might start wondering why a mother leaves her kid with a stranger. Then he turned and walked away. That night, I couldn't sleep. I stared at the ceiling, playing his words over and over. The way he laughed. The way he made her feel like the problem. I got up and pulled out the folder. I opened a new document and typed the header in all caps. Statement of neglect. Incidents involving Gregory L. Hansen, APT 3B. Because I was done waiting. If no one else was going to fight for Zoe, I was. By the end of the week, I'd filed a report with the police. Quietly. I gave them everything. Carla agreed to give her statement too. The officer said they'd look into it, but I could hear it in his voice. This wasn't a priority. No injuries. No video. No drama. Just a little girl who got scared. To them, it was probably a misunderstanding. But I wasn't letting it go. So, I kept digging. I looked into Greg's name. Full name, like I'd written in the report, Gregory L. Hansen. Public records, property records, anything. He didn't own his unit, just rented like me. But something strange popped up when I searched court records in the next county over. 5 years ago, an emergency restraining order filed by a woman named Denise Hansen, his sister. The details were sealed. But the timing lined up. She filed it, then he moved here about 6 months later. Something bad happened back then. I could feel it. I found her on Facebook, took a shot and messaged her. Hi Denise, I'm sorry to bother you. I live in the same building as your brother Greg. I think he hurt my daughter. I just need to understand what kind of man he really is. I didn't expect an answer. But 2 days later, she wrote back. Her message was short. No small talk. Keep your daughter away from him. I haven't spoken to him in years. When I got divorced, I stayed with him for 3 months. My son was 6 at the time. Something happened. I won't get into it. But I'll tell you this. He can be cruel in ways that don't leave marks. Watch your back. I stared at that message for a long time. I didn't show it to anyone. I just added it to the file. Then another strange thing happened. Rob, the building manager, knocked on my door. Hey, he said. We got a complaint. Greg says you're harassing him. He wants us to issue a notice. I told him we'd check into it. I laughed. I laughed out loud. He locked my kid outside in 40-degree weather. I know. I heard. I'm just saying he's trying to flip it. Greg was playing defense. He knew I was closing in. That night I got a slip under my door. A letter. No return address. It just said, drop it. Or next time, she'll stay outside all night.
No signature. No anduritin ni rakumisa.
But I knew. I called the cops. Again. They opened an investigation. Finally, I bought a camera and pointed it at my front door. I bought one for Zoe's room. I didn't tell anyone.
I didn't post online.
I just waited. Because now I knew what kind of man Greg really was. And I wasn't done yet. I still don't know what the cops will do. Maybe nothing. Maybe everything. But Zoe doesn't flinch when she hears his door open anymore, and that's something. I still don't sleep much. I replay that night in my head. Her voice, her shaking hands, how small she looked curled up by the door. And I keep thinking, I was just across the hall. I trusted him, and I was right there.